How did you find out someone had a crush on you? Story 1. We were mutual friends, so sat together in a few classes and occasionally texted about homework. I was looking for our friend at a Halloween party one weekend, and he offered to help me. The party's packed, and he says, want to platonically hold hands so we don't lose each other. I knew it then, and I was already interested, but he'd been so shy whenever I hinted at liking him, so I waited him out. 3 drinks later, we'd given up on finding our friend and are sitting on the lawn when he turns to me and says, I have a very not little crush on you, so just wanted to get that out of the way. We had a blast talking a little longer, and he walked me home. The next weekend I saw him again at a party lacking breathing room and yelled in his ear, I'm going outside. Do you want to come with me and non-platonically hold hands so we don't lose each other? He cracked a mile-wide smile, planted one on me, and we've been together since. She sent me an email with, adult things, photos with our heads pasted on them. She had been an internet friend that I had no romantic interest in and never flirted with. She never flirted with me either so far as I could tell. We had talked for about 3 years, almost daily, but always platonic stuff. She was quite a bit older than me, and while I never told her this, I looked at her more like a fun aunt. I got a girlfriend, and when I told my friend about it, she absolutely flipped out. Cussed me up one side, down the other. Told me I had broken her heart, on and on and on. I was stunned. I apologized and told her I had just seen us as friends and hadn't meant to make her think it was anything more than that. That's when the adult photos started showing up. And creepy, this could have been us messages. I blocked her on everything, which was like 2 things because this was 20 years ago. About a year ago I got curious and looked up her name. She ran for and won a small government position in her hometown about 3 years back. Found some newspaper articles and discovered a few things. She had been married for 30 years. She had claimed to be single when we talked. I had been 19 when we started talking. She had claimed to be 30. She had actually been 42, and she had kids that are older than me. I was at work, having a conversation with a couple of female coworkers about their grooming routines. I worked in a mostly female clothes shop at the time. As they were explaining their choice of either bikini lines, runway strips, or Brazilian, they had asked me as a guy what I preferred. I said I quite like it neat or shaved, and another female colleague walked in and blurted out, I'd shave mine for you. Turned bright red, and then hurried out of the room. I don't think she meant to say it quite as bluntly as she did, bless her. I was in a relationship at the time, so nothing happened between us. I was pretty sure my friend's little sister had a crush on me when she started following me around like a lost puppy. Then she randomly started calling me by my first and middle name. Then she found out my birthday from someone and started telling me our age difference. It was kind of cute until she decided she should tell her friends that we were dating. We were not dating. I had a nice conversation with her letting her know that her crush was flattering, but she was way too young for me, and that she needed to stop telling people that we were dating since it was not true and could get me in a lot of trouble. In true typical teenager logic, she said that her parents wouldn't have a problem with it, and I could date her if I wanted to. Story 5. We had a lockdown drill, and at the time, I was in Spanish with one of her best friends, so she very carefully and deliberately crawls over to me from the other side of the room. She's 15, 6'2", and just army crawling her way across the room towards me. Literally everyone in the class, including the teacher, is just staring at this girl. Let's call her Maria. I'm sure if the teacher had a second to prepare, she would have told Maria not to do this. But again, this is a big girl just army crawling her way across the floor. No one woke up and thought this would be what they would see that day. So she gets across the room and just sits up next to me and greets me. She makes small talk, which is normal because we're kind of friends too, because we've hung out in groups before outside of school, and we're also part of an after-school thing. So far, the army crawling is the only abnormal thing to happen here. Suddenly, she asks me, so is there anyone you like? And at the time, I did kind of like this one girl that we'll call Elizabeth, but she's part of the group and the after-school thing and her best friend, and we're all about 15 to 16, so I didn't want to say her name. So I just said, yeah. Is it Elizabeth? You should ask her out. But will she? She won't. Maria had a very serious look on her face, and being like half her size, I was briefly scared for my safety, because she also said this with a lot of authority. As it turns out, Elizabeth had had a crush on me for weeks, and just constantly talked about me to her friends, who would repeatedly tell her to just ask me out, but that she was too scared to make the first move, and they were all sick and tired of hearing about me. So yeah, that's how I found out that Elizabeth had a crush on me. Asked her a few days later, because I was a crab, and was too scared to ask her out that same day or any of the other days I saw her. and we dated for the next 10 months or so. She was actually my first real girlfriend, and is still one of my longest relationships to date. Story 6. I had a 9-year-old neighbor's daughter just randomly out of the blue tackle-hug me from behind and absolutely refused to let go. Her family was over, and we were all just hanging out and chatting, and she was off quietly playing when I laughed at something, and out of nowhere, she ran at me. Everyone else could see her but me, and I didn't know what was happening until the hump and squeeze. Her mom burst out laughing. The girl was giggling and squeezing as tight as she could, burying her face into my back. She was literally half as tall as me and on her tiptoes to hang onto my waist. I had to spin around, look down to see her hands, then pry them apart and pretend to dance step her away from me. My attempt at trying not to embarrass her, as I had never met her before, and to avoid getting grabbed onto again until her mom finally grabbed a hold of her. Got eyes in the back of my head now. I used to work in a call center, hell on earth, do not recommend, which had those old high-walled cubicles in which you could isolate yourself if you leaned forward enough, and not see anything around you. One day I am on a call, and I am super focused, leaning forward, staring at my screen, you get the picture. Now at the time I had really long hair, waist-lengthish, so I was pretty used to it getting caught in stuff. As I am chatting away, I feel as though my hair is being tugged very lightly. No biggie, it happens often, and because of the walls of my cubicle, I can't really see anything in my peripherals. After a while the sensation grows and starts to become distracting, so I glance over my shoulder, and what do I see? My good friend and coworker, or so I thought, sniffing and kissing a lock of my hair. I was so stunned, I couldn't even react. This mofo was in full weed mode. It was exactly like something you'd see in an anime. I don't know how to explain this more accurately. Long story short, he confessed during lunch break. I rejected him. I still feel icky remembering this. I was due in a couple weeks to move halfway across the country for my job, so I was hanging out with a local friend to say goodbye. That night I admitted I would have asked her out if I wasn't moving so far away. There was a moment of silence, and she responded with, "Yeah, I probably would have said yes. You're quite the catch." Later that night, we're lying on her bed watching anime. She gets up to use the bathroom, so I stretch my arms out. She comes back, sees me stretched out, says, "Oh, an arm," and cuddles right up to me. We're dating now. I had a crush on my friend's sister. When she found out, she called me and asked why I had never asked her out on a date. She knew I was interested because I had told some friends that I was and they had told her. The reason I hadn't is because her brother and I were friends before I met her. When she called, I told her I'd be thrilled to take her out, but I wanted to make sure it was cool with her brother first. He was cool with it, and we've been together 18 years now. Dating a friend's sister could have turned out bad, though, to be honest. Story 10. I talked to her at an ice cream shop. She was working behind the counter. First time meeting her, and thought she was way out of my league. Had to be the prettiest girl I've ever seen. Red hair and blue eyes. No one else was there, and she was recommending different things. Got my ice cream and left. I noticed her smiling a lot at me, which I was never used to. I've never thought myself to be attractive, and I didn't date growing up. Came back a few days later and just decided to ask her out randomly to my friend's party. She actually gave me her number, and we met up before the party at the park. Ended up getting dinner and going to the movies after. It was a very long first date, but we didn't seem to want it to end. 9 years later, we are married, and our baby just turned 1 year old. You never know till you ask. The worst one was a guy who wouldn't take no for an answer. As far as I knew, he was straight, so I sort of assumed it was a joke the first couple times. But he asked me out several more times, and I just got more confused. I wasn't really into him, and I kept assuming he was going to make it into a joke with his straight bros about how he got me to say yes. Then he got pissed off, saying he was going out on a limb by asking out a slur redacted, and I should be grateful he would even consider me like that. Dude had some internal issues to sort, I think. Dodged a bullet there. This happened quite recently, and I went on vacation to Malta, where I have some family and 2 friends that moved there from my country. I met up with both of them separately, and one basically ghosted me afterwards, even though she was the one to ask me to come to Malta for a week. The other one was busy with work, so I just stayed home, Grandma's place, for a day, and my father called an old friend of his who has a daughter my age. She had nothing to that evening and invited me to go for a coffee. Of course, I said yes. Anything is better than sitting at home doing basically nothing. She picked me up, and we just went somewhere to get a coffee. So during the coffee, we had a good talk and laugh as well, had a lot of the same interests. Afterwards, I paid for the coffee, even though she offered to pay, because she invited me for a coffee. Understandable, but I had a great time, so I wanted to pay. The next morning, she sent me a good morning text. No one I know has done that before to me, so she was the first. We sent texts back and forth, and she was wanted to meet up again. It was at this date/meet I noticed the way she was looking, and I knew she had a crush on me. The next day we went again, but for dinner this time, and later in the evening on a bench, she slowly got closer and closer. I noticed she wanted to kiss me, but the moron I am didn't react the first time. I did get to kiss her like a minute later. Then a few days later, I had done it with her, and she is my girlfriend now. Overall, my vacation was a success. Not in the way I thought it would go, but this was way better. I didn't. Months after losing contact with her, a mutual friend told me that she had a crush on me. The worst part is that I had a crush on her too, but my dumbass attributed all the green lights she gave me as her just being nice. She used to reserve me a seat right next to her in the university library to study together. She would always offer to bring me coffee or a soda when she at the cafeteria. She even bought me snacks, even when I asked for nothing. She used to go out of her way to drive me home, even though she lived in the other side of town. She used to help me study even when I didn't want to bother her. And a lot of other small details that I always just thought she did out of kindness, and not anything else. One grad school colleague showed up to game nights and drinking nights that I hosted, and she would just tear into me mercilessly, criticizing everything I did, putting me down, the whole thing. The worst thing was, she was speaking in Chinese and I didn't feel up to date with current slang in Chinese, so I couldn't really spar with her. I just ended up ignoring her, since I got the impression she was making just barely acceptable snarky comments. Whereas if I try to respond similarly in Chinese, I'd be burning your fields and poisoning your wells, too overly serious. We were on a U.S. campus. My circle of friends included a lot of Chinese grad students. Finally, I got to leave the campus and go on my internship. I met one of the mutual Chinese friends for drinks and I mentioned it's so weird that she was such a bitch to me the whole time. The Chinese friend told me that she had liked me a lot, and all the Chinese folks knew it. And I was like, this changes nothing, and I'm still glad I'll never see her again. The Chinese friend said, she'll be very sad to hear that her actions caused you to feel this way. Freshman year of high school, I get my locker assigned and it turns out they've assigned by last name in alphabetical order. My locker is next to a girl I went to elementary school and middle school with, and it now looks like we'll be locker neighbors/buddies for the next 4 years. I can't complain, I know her as a classmate and nothing more. As the high school years go on, we get to know each other a bit more and start sharing various class notes, small birthday gifts, candy, etc. By senior year, I've fallen hard for her. She's super cute, funny, and we get along splendidly. We went to a Catholic school. I don't particularly believe nor practice anymore, so we were required to go on retreats every year. The senior one is basically half a week long, with like 40 to 50 of your classmates. We're both on the same retreat. We get there, and they go over the rules. The only one I clearly remember was boys are to stay in their dormitory wing and girls are to stay in theirs. We are not to mix color and make purple as they termed it. Well, she turns to me and says, "Hey, goddammit, Goose, we should make purple." Me and my infinite wisdom agreed but took it as a friendly joke between the two of us. Nothing happens, shocker, and we graduate college. She goes to a university out of state in a city I've got family in, and I stay in state, and to go to university about 2 hours away from home. One day my freshman year, I get a message on Facebook. The sports doctor for the university she goes to is my uncle, my dad's older brother. We joke about it, and I leave it at that. Now fast forward another 5 or 6 years. We've graduated and been our separate ways and haven't talked since freshman year of high school. I'm getting ready to go out to meet with a longtime friend to grab a beer and get some cheesies in Chicago. It's then, all those years later, does it hit me. She had a crush on me. I just about lost it cracking up at the absurdity of it all. We both had crushes on each other and neither did a damn thing about it because teenagers are awkward as hell. Anyway, I meet up with my friend and tell him my revelation and he's like, "You didn't know?" Her friends all told me she crushed on you super hard. So we're spending the rest of the evening talking about how all of the popular girls of our class had crushes on us. And we were both oblivious to the fact as we found playing Star Wars Battlefront 2 and the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion in our basements way more fun and entertaining at the time. I, 20 male, was on staff at a summer camp and she, 19 female, we'll call her R, was an adult leader during a middle school week. I think Wednesday night some of the girls in her dorm figured it out. Thursday morning I walk into the cafeteria for breakfast and see them grouped up with ours back to me. One of the girls sees me walk in and her face lights up and she says excitedly, "There he is, there he is." turns to me with a flustered blushed face and said, I made a mistake. I, having worked with middle schoolers since I was 1, immediately knew what she was talking about. We shut it down any time the girls brought it up during the week. We're getting married this August. I went to get her some water and tissues because she was crying. I came back and she was naked in my living room. The problem is, I am married and could not oblige, and she was my brother-in-law's girlfriend, so it was icy. To be fair, my wife and I are poly, and I think she just drunkenly misunderstood the rules. Anyway, I told her we should go to bed and took her to the spare room. She was still adamant about having sex, so I told her we'd talk about it tomorrow. She left embarrassed without saying anything and broke up with my brother-in-law. I guess she realized her mistakes when a bit more sober and didn't want any part of it. I told my wife, but I don't know if she told her brother or not. I missed all signals from a friend. Never caught on to any of them. There were a few people over at her place having drinks. When the crowd got really thin, she pulled me aside and said she wanted to show me something. Took me to her room, handed me massage oil, took off her shirt and bra, and laid on her bed. I stood there stunned for a second until she said, Well, what are you waiting for? I replied with a yes ma'am and got to work law. I'm generally so aloof it is amazing I'm not gonna be the 40-year-old virgin. In college in the late 90s I got an email from a crush site, alerting me that someone had entered my email in as their crush. If I created an account and entered that person's email into the site as my crush, it would let us both know. Instead I went to the login page and tried logging in using the emails of the people I suspected as crushing on me. All but one had an account on the site, the quiet girl who lived right next door.